Right, hello again. Sorry, my last video got cut off. But basically, just to sum up the last point that I was on, it's like reinforcement and really finding what our students really enjoy, are motivated by. We can utilize this for promoting learning, especially with things that can be less preferred. So it's definitely a way to do that. Um, and then just kind of like how this goes hand in hand with mastery learning. Research shows that a success rate of 80% is optimal for learning for most students. This motivates students by helping them to feel successful. It gives them confidence and shows them that there's still room for progress in the future. So designing our assessments with this 80% benchmark in mind, it does require us to increase the accessibility for students by reducing the challenge until they're ready to tackle more complex questions and tasks. So this will look like, the context standards, like really modifying them to make sure that the student really can obtain the standard, kind of like meeting the students where they're at, but with ongoing assessments and learning, we are bridging that gap so they can actually meet that level of mastery. And, certainly might take students more time than others to master content in a unit, but students can be encouraged to go at their own pace or receiving more targeted practice and support. We want our students to have strong building blocks of knowledge so their foundation doesn't crumble in the face of more complex challenges as they get older. And number 4, complement strong assessment with descriptive and frequent feedback throughout the teaching unit. I highly recommend listening to the Tatted Prof podcast after this professional development day whenever you want, kind of some refreshers and helpful tips while creating assessments. I definitely took a lot of tips from Dr. King on these podcasts to create this professional development opportunity. One especially thing that I thought was really interesting was the classroom audio example, where her college freshman and sophomore students bounced feedback and ideas off each other in groups and reflected on creating weekly podcasts, which kind of like confirmed the benefits of, like providing feedback throughout the lesson as opposed to just the end, and kind of providing like these weekly opportunities for students to collaborate on these podcasts and kind of like get better and really kind of delve into the content on their own terms. So it's really interesting also to hear a student express the revelation that making the podcast was an assessment the whole time, but they didn't even realize it, which I thought was kind of funny. So it came so natural to them and it felt lower stakes that it wasn't really a test. It was just a simply way for them to learn and grasp the information better. So I'd say, like providing accurate feedback, making sure that there's, great opportunities, especially with technology, like whether it's podcasts, Prezzies, PowerPoints, whatever the student really chooses to do. Like audio, music, video, really, they can be very creative about it. Um, it makes it so it's less stressful. It doesn't really feel like, like a big assessment or test that they have to stress out about. That often kind of yields the best performance out of students. Let's see. And then this also can be very good for students who aren't the strongest writers or students who, English isn't their first language. And while traditional grading takes a lot of time, the students take away more concrete skills from specific feedback on how they can improve next time. It was interesting that the majority of students in my graduate class of assessment of learning indicated that getting a good grade played one, if not the most central role in motivating them to do good work in school. Grades are also a source of student stress and oftentimes do not adequately reflect student knowledge and skill acquisition. So that's something to be careful about, and maybe kind of maybe something to inspire creating a less traditional grading system for your classroom. So I would definitely encourage educators to try out different grading systems, even ones that may incorporate gamification in the form of earning points or tokens. It can be confusing, definitely, for students at first to adjust, and educators should clearly explain the breakdown of what behavior earns points and what amount of points corresponds to work traditionally denoted to an A grade. But you also don't need to feel rushed to overhaul the grading system overnight. This can be trialed with one lesson or one activity in a given class. Data collection also goes hand in hand with the topic of feedback, since data is the ultimate objective feedback for teachers, the school district, and other stakeholders. And this data can be utilized even with, like scores and grades like Kahoot, if you really find like a good way to calculate and break down these assessments into like a solid grade. And number 5, the last thing I want to touch on is that we must acknowledge that the education paradigm is changing, which means the state and national education assessment standards are in limbo with the current administration, as well as like federal funding. But we do still have the tools to create productive assessments that build bright futures for students. Right? No one can really take that away from us, and we should utilize this for as long as we have. And with this in mind, I think of like the 5 C's of teaching, how we can promote collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, and choice for our students. And really, we have the choice to do that in all of our assessments, but especially when we think about utilizing technology, and having our students delve more into technology tools, but also for us to break away from our traditional grading and really find different ways to um, assess student strengths. And this compiles like 21st century skills. They're very technology based, but they're also rooted in critical thinking skills. Um, so while we think like the state of public education is under attack and it's very scary, it is up to us as educators to defend our art and the intellectual rights of our students. And while gaming does, like, be seen as a hobby or a form of escapism, I think Deborah Mensah-Bonsu does a really good job in her TED Talk describing in depth the great advantages of gaming on collaboration, community, and social emotional learning. Um, and then just for technology, we should always encourage students to use different platforms, and then technology tools that I specifically would encourage educators at our school to explore is Boom Cards, Edpuzzle, and Google Forms, as a way to create kind of like low stakes exit tickets throughout the unit. So Boom Cards is really awesome. I think it's a great app and very usable for students to kind of just go on when they have kind of free time in class. It gives them a score right away. It's kind of something that they can check on their own. It's not something that they have to wait on teachers to give back a grade, which is really helpful. So they kind of get that immediate feedback. Um, and it's also like things that we can specifically design, but we also have a lot of really awesome free resources that we can utilize, which saves a lot of time. Um, but yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy the PowerPoint. I look forward to kind of giving more of a tutorial on the technology assessment tools at a later date. And yeah, happy assessing and happy learning. Thank you.